Okay, welcome back, Science 10s, to our next lesson in Chapter 8. Today we're going to be looking at 8.4, and we're going to be looking at biomes. Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to look at the categories of where life exists, starting with very broad, where anywhere life exists, with our first definition, which is the biosphere. Familiar from Chapter 7, we looked at the hydrosphere, the lithosphere, the atmosphere, the biosphere just being life, biosphere, the area where life is going to exist. So anywhere where life's going to exist. And we do find life in all those, living on the Earth's surface, in the water, in the air, pretty much everywhere on the Earth's surface. The next one, which is going to be the focus of this lesson, is biome. Biome is a little bit more specific. It's saying a major geographical area, similar in environmental conditions, and having similar life forms or similar plants and animals. So examples of this would be things like tundra, grassland, tropical rainforest, stuff like this, which hopefully is a little bit familiar even before getting to this lesson. And before we get more specific, it's important to note that these are considered open systems. What's an open system? You might remember from chemistry, we were talking about when matter and energy can or can't go in and out of a system. An open system is matter and energy can be exchanged. So if I'm looking at a biome, plants or animals could come in or out of that biome. And energy, like from the sun, can come in and can be released as heat. So definitely an open system, and the rest will be as well. Technically, the biosphere is an open system as well, kind of like Earth is an open system. It just doesn't exchange matter with space very much. Every time you see a shooting star, there is a little bit coming in from space, and we can have things enter Earth from space. It's just not as common, so we often don't talk about it as an open system, but these are all technically open systems. Let's get a little bit more specific here. After biome, a subsection there is an ecosystem. So an ecosystem is part of a biome. There's lots of ecosystems in a biome. It's an area of interacting, living, biotic things, and non-living, abiotic things. So I like the word there, ecosystem. You can think of a system, things interacting with each other, whether living or non-living, all interacting with each other. And we have one more level to go to, which is going to be habitat. Habitat is a smaller section because we're only focusing on one species. It's an area where a species' needs are all met. So if you're focusing on rabbits, you're saying an area where rabbits are able to live. They have all the things to meet their needs. It's a smaller section called a habitat. So some definitions off the start there, some different categories. You can see some definition questions on any of those. Okay, so now we'll focus on biomes, the main topic for today's lesson, and we'll look at things that affect a biome. And the biggest thing that's going to affect a biome is its latitude. Latitude is how far north or south that you are on the globe. As we go closer towards the poles, we're going to get cooler temperatures, more drastic seasons. Closer to the equator, kind of more consistency. Okay. It is also affected by altitude. So if you're going to go high up a mountain, gaining upwards or like kind of higher into the atmosphere, that's gaining altitude. And generally gets colder as you gain altitude, so that can affect where biomes are going to exist as well. Notice their height above sea level. It's usually measured as. Okay, how we're going to describe a biome is based off, kind of mentioned before, temperature and precipitation, the biggest two. Humidity also a factor of a biome. We're just not going to focus on it as much in this lesson. Temperature and precipitation, the biggest thing. And why there's such a big factor is those are also going to give rise to what types of life can live there. You're going to need certain temperatures and certain amount of precipitation for various plants, and therefore the different animals and insects and stuff like that. And in this class, we're going to look at 6 biomes. There's 4 that are kind of similar, just kind of getting increasingly warm, and then there's 2 that are very different. But let's take a look at what those 6 biomes are, starting with the coldest one, which is going to be the tundra. So tundra is usually closer to the poles. Some descriptions here. It's got long and cold winters. It's going to be minus 40 or even colder in these very northern or southern regions. There's not very much precipitation. There's going to be some snow, but not very much precipitation. Grass, because of that, not having much precipitation, is the main variation of plant. And any type of animal has to be able to keep itself warm. So they're usually furry animals. So I just have some snow here as the precipitation, and some furry animals would be what lives there. Next, we're going to move a little bit closer to the equator, but it still can be cold, is the taiga or taiga. I've kind of heard both, that could kind of look like this in the winter, definitely get some cold seasons, but could also look like this in the summer. It's a little bit more seasonal than the tundra would be. So it's a little bit warmer than the tundra, a little bit more precipitation, so it can grow some different types of plants. We have some grass, just like we did in the tundra, but also some usually coniferous forests. What's a coniferous forest? It's one that does not shed its leaves during the fall and into the winter. So you can have coniferous like cones, like pine cones, stuff like that. Okay. It has furry animals as well that usually kind of change how much fur they have based off adapting to the seasons, but usually furry animals as well. Okay, that's our first two. Moving on, we're going to go to next a deciduous forest. So here we can see some deciduous trees. This is in the fall. They're starting to change color and lose their leaves. We're getting a little bit warmer still. So going from the tundra to the coniferous forest and the taiga, now to the deciduous forest, we just keep getting a little bit warmer. We also keep getting a little bit more precipitation. So we're getting a little bit further closer to the equator. We have grass and deciduous trees in the deciduous forest. That kind of makes sense. Furry animals and then often change color. So it could be shedding their fur, changing to adapt to snow, kind of like a rabbit would have white fur in the snow. But then when it goes to fall, it would change its fur color as well. And next we go to grassland, which could be at a similar latitude as a deciduous forest, but it doesn't have as much precipitation. So it's not able to support all those big trees and that big forest. Okay, so we can see even in this picture, there's some parts of the forest there, but shows a large amount of grass. Okay, so similar taiga and deciduous forest, except for less precipitation. Okay, grasses are the main variation due to the less rain. That's why it's called grassland. Kind of makes sense. I didn't put anything about the animals there. It does experience seasons as well. So often furry animals, think similar to deciduous forest, just less precipitation. And now we go on to our last two, probably the most famous of them. The first one, the tropical rainforest. Definitely closer to the equator. You have consistent heat, consistent precipitation, pretty much giving rise to a whole bunch of things that can live and grow here. So consistently warm, lots of rain, lots of biodiversity, where we see the most biodiversity. Just a reminder, what's biodiversity mean? Different types of life, different types of plants, insects, animals, everything like that. Next one's similar in that you have consistent high temperatures, but very little precipitation, which is the desert. Desert is very hot, but it's often very dry as well. So it's not going to give rise to very much plants. Little plant life, you're going to have things like cacti and stuff like that that can survive in really dry temperatures, but not very many plants. The types of animals that survive there, reptiles survive really well, but without as much plant material, harder to have as many animals as well. Okay, moving on to how we can show the information about these different biomes is on a climograph. So a climograph is going to show us temperature and precipitation and how it generally changes throughout the year. So looking at the bottom there, it says JFMA. This is the months of the year: January, February, March, April, and so on for the whole year. So we're going to put on the axis here, temperature is going to be on one side, and it looks maybe something like this. So beginning on the far side there, cooler January, warming up in the spring, it's reaching its peak during the summer, and then coming back down. So this would be a seasonal climatic graph. Okay, often connect them with a line to show kind of the trend of the temperature. But this graph, or this climograph, doesn't just show temperature, it also wants to show precipitation, because we want to give the two most important parts for a biome. So it's going to put it on the same graph. Precipitation here is just going to be shown with a bar graph. Sometimes students ask on a test, was the dots or is the bars the precipitation? You actually do have to remember that part. The dots are the temperature, the bars are showing the precipitation. So they don't necessarily line up. They often kind of do. Like we see here, we start here with a low precipitation, a low temperature, but then the temperature kind of gets lower in February here, and it had a little bit more precipitation. So it doesn't necessarily always match here. We can also see like the dot and the bar are significantly far apart from each other, where in something like this, they're pretty close. So you're going to get a little bit of variation there, just know they're different. Types of questions, it could give you some data to draw a climatic graph, or you might have to interpret one. So for example, what biome would look like this? We see the line, remember that's temperature, is looking pretty high, and the bar graphs would be up here. I didn't do the individual lines, but you get the idea. So we have to look at this and say, okay, that's consistently high temperature, consistently high precipitation. That would be a rainforest, tropical rainforest. Look at another one, says, okay, it's also pretty consistently high temperature and low precipitation. That one would probably be a desert. Okay. Or sometimes you have to compare between two, because this general shape of having a peak in the middle, which is a seasonal peak, highest temperature and highest precipitation in the summer, they look very similar, these two graphs, but when you're comparing them, you might have to say, for example, which one's the taiga and which one's the deciduous forest. So if I just gave you one of these, they look kind of similar, that they peak in the middle and it's not crazy high temperature and it's not crazy high precipitation. But comparing them, we can know that, yeah, the taiga and the deciduous forest are pretty similar. We just see a little bit more precipitation, a little bit higher temperatures in the deciduous forest. So this one would be deciduous forest. This one would be the taiga. Okay, and lastly, to finish this video, we're going to look at adaptations, which is when we look at these different biomes, the life that lives there seems to be suited for that biome. So life appears to match the environment. So it seems like they are kind of set up for that. Okay, and we'll look at different types of adaptations. The first one we see here is behavioral. So a way that a species acts to live in that environment. And a really good example is hibernation. So you have bears that might be out and about during spring, summer, and fall. But then during the winter, when there's not as much available to eat, that they're just going to sleep through it and they're going to hibernate. That is a behavior adapted to where they are, or which biome they're in. So we'll call that a behavioral adaptation. Okay. Next, you're going to have physical adaptations for how it looks or things that they have as part of their anatomy. And there's two examples here. Structural, which is something that's like on the outside, like a beak. We see all these different types of birds. They're going to be set up in different places where that's going to make it easier for them to live. Okay, so their beak would be a good example of a physical structural adaptation. There has to be physiological, though, which is still something physical, but it's just inside. For example, stomach enzymes would be something like that, where if there was a certain type of berry available and they developed some stomach enzymes to digest that and get nutrients, it'd be an internal adaptation. Still physical, it's not acting, it's how their body works, but it's on the inside, so we'll call that physiological. I think I had one more photo there of this would be a structural one. This insect looks a lot like a leaf, so it seems suited for this area because it's able to kind of go unnoticed or blend in to the environment. And that's all we have for today's video. I know that's a lot of information to remember, so feel free to go back, rewatch that, and become familiar with all those terms. But I hope that helped you understand biomes and some characteristics of them. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.